Hey guys, tonight we're traveling thousands of years back to a world before paper, before pens, before even the idea that words could live outside your head. You'll find yourself standing on the banks of a broad, lazy river, the Euphrates, where the air smells faintly of wet earth and reeds. The sun hangs heavy and golden over flat fields, and somewhere nearby, someone is squishing their toes into the mud and thinking, this stuff might actually be useful. You probably won't survive this, by the way, not because of danger, but because it's 3000 BCE, there's no air conditioning, and the mosquitoes here could probably carry off a small goat.
So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the land of Sumer, the cradle of civilization, though no one here calls it that yet. The air hums with the buzz of insects, the bleating of goats, and the murmur of people bartering in a language you don't understand. Everything around you feels both familiar and impossibly old. The people here have learned to farm, to herd, to build temples and cities out of mud brick. But there's one problem. Their world has become too complicated for memory alone. You watch as a man in a linen kilt argues over a shipment of grain. He points to a pile of sacks and waves his arms dramatically. His partner squints suspiciously. Without receipts, without lists, without proof, arguments like this happen every day, and that's where the clay comes in. Along the edge of the river, a young assistant kneels by a pile of damp earth. He mixes it with water, presses it into little rounded lumps, and sets them out to dry. Each one fits neatly in the palm of his hand. Into the soft surface, he presses tiny shapes using a stick. A circle here for a jar of oil, a cone there for a sack of barley. One by one, he drops these tokens into a small clay envelope, seals it shut, and rolls a cylinder seal across the surface, a tiny engraved image that serves as a signature. It looks simple, but this moment of squishing and sealing and pressing is the first spark of writing. You lean closer, the smell of wet clay rising sharp and earthy. It's strange to think that civilization's memory begins with mud and impatience. But that's the beauty of it. Out of something as ordinary as riverbank sludge, people found a way to make thoughts stay still. The mainstream historical fact here is this. The earliest writing didn't start as storytelling or poetry. It started as bookkeeping. Around 3500 BCE, in the cities of Uruk and the first signs carved into clay recorded trades, rations, and taxes. Writing began not with Shakespearean ambition, but with the eternal human desire to make sure someone didn't cheat them out of a goat. You crouch beside the assistant as he finishes sealing another tablet. The surface gleams slick in the heat. He places it carefully on a wooden board, where it will dry just enough to harden, not too much or it might crack, not too soft or it'll smear. It's a delicate balance, like baking a loaf of bread in the sun. The sound of his stylus tapping against clay forms a soft rhythm, a kind of ancient typing, a steady tick-tick-tick. The tablet records a transaction, 10 jars of sesame oil, 2 baskets of dates, 1 promise of future payment. You can almost hear the accountant muttering, "We'll see about that." And here's a quirky tidbit historians love. Some of the very earliest tablets we found don't make much sense. They're filled with marks that seem halfway between numbers and doodles, as if someone were learning how to think on clay. One tablet from ancient Uruk even appears to be a practice piece, the Mesopotamian equivalent of a messy homework page. Someone, 5,000 years ago, was just trying to get the hang of it. You notice the stylus itself, a reed cut into a triangular wedge. When pressed into the clay, it leaves a distinctive shape that we now call cuneiform, from the Latin word cuneus, meaning wedge. But at this point in your story, no one's calling it that yet. To them, it's simply marks, a way of making sure your word means something even after you've walked away. The man in charge, probably a temple official, checks the tablet, nods approvingly, and sets it aside. Later, it'll be dried, stored, and stacked neatly in a room full of thousands just like it. Rows upon rows of sun-baked clay, an ancient filing system centuries before paper existed. You can almost imagine the smell of it. Dry dust, faintly sweet from straw and river silt. Somewhere, a child sneezes. Someone laughs softly. The city hums with life. Historians still argue whether these first symbols were true writing or merely elaborate accounting marks. Was this the birth of language on clay, or just a very fancy way to count sheep? Either way, you're standing at the threshold of something enormous. The first time human thought became external. The first time memory could live outside the mind. You wander through the marketplace as the day wanes. The air cools and long shadows stretch across the mud brick walls. Traders call out prices, children chase each other through the dust, and above it all rises the grand ziggurat, the temple tower, gleaming faintly in the setting sun. Somewhere inside, more scribes are at work, documenting donations, prayers, and offerings. Their styluses tap like a soft rain. You pause by the river again, watching the surface ripple gold and bronze in the evening light. A man beside you sighs, muttering something about missing tablets and broken seals. You can tell he's frustrated. His entire system of proof depends on fragile pieces of clay. But even with their flaws, these little tablets have started something unstoppable. There's something profoundly human about this scene. The desire to record, to remember, to make sure your version of reality sticks around. Clay doesn't care about your intentions. It simply holds whatever you press into it. And that's part of its charm. Every thumbprint, every imperfect mark still visible thousands of years later. A literal touch across time. You pick up a half-dried tablet someone dropped. It's small, rough-edged, with a few uneven lines of marks. You can still feel the warmth of the sun in it. In your palm, it's light, fragile, and yet it's history's first whisper. The first time someone decided their thoughts deserve to last longer than a breath. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The quiet murmur of a civilization discovering permanence. The soft press of reeds into clay. The sigh of a scribe content that today's work will still exist tomorrow. The first pages of human memory weren't made of paper or even stone. They were mud, river mud, sun-dried, sometimes accidentally baked in fires that turned them to ceramic, making them nearly immortal. By accident, humanity invented not just writing, but also archiving. And all it took was curiosity, trade disputes, and a little too much clay on someone's sandals. You turn the tablet over one last time, noticing a faint fingerprint along the edge. Someone's, long gone, but still here. Maybe they were tired, maybe distracted, maybe they pressed too hard and didn't care. And yet, 5,000 years later, you can still feel their presence. The river hums quietly beside you. The day cools into dusk. In the distance, smoke curls from a hearth, carrying the smell of baked bread and clay dust. The marks you've witnessed tonight, these quiet wedges, will become the backbone of human civilization. And for now, they're just beginning. The next morning comes softly, the kind of slow dawn that seems to stretch across the plains, the sky turning from inky violet to pale gold. You're still in Sumer, your feet dusty, your clothes lightly crusted with yesterday's dried mud. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows, sounding both confident and utterly unmusical. The air smells faintly of reeds, baked clay, and breakfast porridge. You stretch, trying not to imagine how far away your air-conditioned bedroom is right now. Today, you're about to witness something astonishing. Marks that still aren't quite words. You crouch by a merchant's stall, its surface covered in little lumps and cones of clay. Some are round, Some are flat, and others are shaped like tiny envelopes, sealed with thumbprints. They look like something you'd find in a bag of trail mix, if trail mix came with a side of bureaucracy. This is the age of proto-writing, the slow, experimental prelude before true writing existed. Humanity hasn't quite figured out that symbols can represent language. They're still using marks to represent things. Each shape, each impression stands for an object. A jar of oil, a loaf of bread, a goat, or maybe two goats if you squint and hope your accountant is honest. You watch as a trader kneels and arranges a few of these clay tokens on a woven mat. He's counting out barley owed to the temple, 10 round tokens for 10 baskets. A scribe squats nearby, trying to keep up, scratching marks into his own damp tablet with a stylus. It's not a language yet, just marks that correspond to the number of items and their shapes. But slowly, something is happening. People are realizing that clay can capture meaning without the thing itself being present. You can almost feel that cognitive spark, the moment when a human brain first connects the dots and realizes that a mark can stand in for reality. It's the birth of abstraction, and it's happening in front of you in the form of little lumps of mud. A mainstream historical fact to anchor us here. Around 3300 BCE, in the city of Uruk, scribes began pressing stylus marks into clay to record transactions using pictographs. These were not letters or words, but drawings of objects. A simple triangle might mean grain. A wavy line might mean water. It's crude, but it's enough to run an economy, which honestly is more than some modern startups can say. You lean closer, watching the scribe's hand move with careful rhythm. His stylus, a thin reed cut into a wedge, presses into the clay at angles, forming triangular impressions. The sound is quiet but steady, like gentle tapping on a keyboard. He doesn't rush. Every mark counts, because each one represents trust. At one point, he pauses, squinting at the token before him, clearly trying to remember if this particular shape means sheep or goat. You can practically see the thought flicker across his brow. There has to be an easier way to keep track of this nonsense. And that's the quirky tidbit for today. Early accountants actually sealed their clay tokens inside larger clay envelopes called boulets, and then stamped the outside with impressions showing what was inside. Imagine sending someone a sealed box labeled "contains 3 loaves of bread, 2 sheep, and a polite disagreement." Eventually, people realized it was easier to just write the symbols directly on the tablet and skip the envelope entirely. The first step toward written language was basically the world's oldest attempt at cutting paperwork. As the day warms, you wander through the marketplace. Everywhere, people are scratching and pressing, leaving tiny marks in their tablets. Some of them look like shapes you almost recognize: a head of grain, a fish, a jar. They're pictures, yes, but more than that, they're ideas made visible. The hum of the city becomes a soft background drone. The bleating of animals, the clatter of pottery, the slosh of water jars. And somewhere within it, the gentle whisper of styluses on clay, as civilization quietly takes notes. You pause to watch a young apprentice sitting cross-legged in the dust, his small tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he presses symbols into a scrap of clay. His master stands behind him, frowning, correcting each wobbly mark. The boy sighs. You recognize the universal face of every student since time began. Do I really have to learn this? Historians still argue whether these early pictographs were ever meant to record spoken language at all. Some suggest they were purely mnemonic, visual cues meant to jog the memory of what was traded or owed. Others believe that even these earliest marks carried faint echoes of spoken syllables, the first baby steps toward phonetic writing. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, tangled like reeds in a riverbank. By midday, the sun glares down with merciless heat. You find shade under a small awning where a few scribes have gathered to eat. One pulls out a still damp tablet, its surface shimmering slightly in the light. You watch as he fans it dry, then flips it over and begins to scratch on the other side. A bit of recycling that would make any modern minimalist proud. Another jokes about accidentally sitting on a wet tablet once and immortalizing the print of his backside. You can't help but chuckle. Apparently, the first written record of oops may have been literal. There's something meditative about the pace of their work. No rushing, no deadlines beyond the slow drying of clay. You feel your breathing slow, your shoulders relax. The scribe's movements are almost hypnotic. Press, lift, like someone writing thoughts in slow motion. Later that afternoon, you follow a young trader back toward the temple complex, where the city's archives are stored. The air inside is cool, dim, and smells faintly of dust and river silt. Shelves of clay tablets stretch to the ceiling, each one labeled, stacked, and sorted. Thousands of silent rectangles holding a city's memories. You run your fingers gently across one of them. The surface feels rough, uneven, and warm to the touch, as if it still remembers the sun. You can't read the symbols, but you can tell that someone once poured hours of effort into them. Somewhere, millennia ago, a human hand shaped this, maybe grumbling about the heat, maybe proud of the neatness of their work. And here it still sits, waiting patiently to be understood. One of the scribes points out an especially old example, a tablet so faint that the marks are barely visible. He explains, in a language you only half comprehend, that it represents quantities of beer owed to workers. That's right, some of the oldest written records in the world are, essentially, ancient bar tabs. Humanity's first archives might just have been ledgers of who still owed whom a drink. The humor of it makes you smile, and maybe that's the point. Writing, at its heart, isn't lofty or divine. It starts with something humble, people trying to make sure the world doesn't forget the details that matter to them, whether that's a story, a shipment, or a promise of beer. As dusk falls again, the sound of the river returns, slow and steady. The clay tokens are being gathered, the tablets stacked neatly for the night. The air cools, carrying the scent of smoke and distant food. You sit on a low wall, watching the orange glow fade from the horizon. You imagine the minds of these early scribes, caught between pictures and words, between counting and storytelling. They don't yet know they've invented something that will outlive their cities, their empires, their gods. The marks they make tonight will dry, harden, and maybe someday, when the city falls, be buried beneath rubble and time. And thousands of years later, someone like you, tired, curious, maybe struggling to sleep, will trace those same wedges with their eyes and try to imagine what they meant. The night deepens. Somewhere, a scribe sighs, stretching his arms. His stylus slips from his fingers and lands softly in the sand. The day's transactions are done, the clay still drying in the quiet dark. You realize you've just witnessed the halfway point between counting pebbles and writing poetry, between thought and language, between silence and civilization. You close your eyes, hearing once again that soft, deliberate tapping. Reeds against clay, thought against time. The next day rises with a soft shimmer over the flat plain. The river glows bronze in the first light, its slow surface broken by a few lazy ripples. You're standing again near the edges of Uruk, where the damp air clings to your skin like a faint whisper of the night before. The city is stirring, donkeys braying, doors creaking open, someone somewhere yelling about misplaced barley. You're starting to realize that civilization, even in its infancy, was never particularly quiet. This morning, you're here to watch something remarkable. The moment when little clay tokens evolve into something flatter, lighter, and far more efficient. The dawn of true tablets. A scribe kneels near the temple's courtyard, his knees leaving small dents in the dust. In front of him lies a basket filled with round clay balls, yesterday's accounting system. He looks unimpressed. Too bulky, you can almost hear him mutter in ancient Sumerian. Takes up too much space. I can't even find the goat tokens anymore. You sympathize. Humanity has been fighting clutter since time began. He glances toward the river, where another man is stirring a tub of clay. The mud is soft, smooth, and pliable, perfect for forming tablets. The scribe dips his hand in, scoops up a lump, and begins pressing it flat on a wooden board. The shape forms easily, a small rectangle about the size of your phone. He smooths it carefully with his palm, leaving faint ridges of fingerprints. And just like that, the token is reborn as the tablet, humanity's first portable hard drive. The air fills with the soft thock of styluses tapping into fresh clay. The scribe presses symbols that once required separate tokens. A circle for oil, a triangle for grain, now flattened into a single plane. It's as if he's saying, why carry 10 things when I can just draw 10 pictures? Somewhere deep inside, an accountant sighs in satisfaction. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Around 3100 BCE, people in Mesopotamia began abandoning the clay token system and switching to tablets with incised signs, the earliest known pictographic writing. The marks, at first, were direct stand-ins for objects. Over time, though, they became abstract, stylized, more about ideas than pictures. You can see that evolution happening right before your eyes. One scribe carving a literal fish, another reducing it to a few sharp strokes. Efficiency was winning. As you stand nearby, you notice the air carries a faint sweetness from drying clay. The soundscape is rhythmic, styluses clicking, traders shouting, the distant splash of water against the riverbank. It's a strangely comforting mix, like the ancient equivalent of lo-fi beats for studying. The scribe pauses to roll a cylinder seal across his finished tablet, a tiny carved roller that leaves an intricate impression. A procession of animals, a few symbols, maybe even his name. It's beautiful, detailed, and totally practical. A personal signature thousands of years before anyone thought of handwriting. You crouch beside him as he places the tablet carefully onto a woven mat to dry. Dozens of them sit there already, gleaming faintly in the light, each holding a record of transactions, prayers, or promises. They look fragile, but once sun-dried or accidentally fired in a hearth, they'll outlast entire dynasties. A child runs by, nearly stepping on the stack. The scribe swats him away, muttering something probably equivalent to, "Do you know how long that took?" You can't help but grin. Some frustrations truly never change. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some of the earliest tablets we found actually include lists of professions. And one of the very first jobs ever written down is beer maker. So while these scribes may be inventing writing for trade and religion, they're also ensuring that nobody forgets who's in charge of the brews. Priorities. By midday, the city swells. You wander through the narrow lanes, past storage yards and temple courtyards where scribes sit in pairs, comparing notes. One shows another how to press symbols more cleanly. Another argues that a particular wedge means ox and not cow. Historians still argue whether those early pictographs were standardized enough to call it a language, or if each city had its own version of ancient handwriting. Probably both. Bureaucracy loves variety. You step into a shaded alcove where two scribes are at work recording temple rations. Their tablets are larger, smoother, more deliberate, official records meant to be kept. One of them carefully lists quantities of grain distributed to workers. You can tell by the neat rows of wedges that this is someone who truly loves their job, or at least their stylus. The other scribe, younger and slightly less patient, keeps glancing toward the window. When he thinks no one's watching, he adds a little doodle, a tiny bird in the corner. You smile. Humanity invents art and boredom in the same afternoon. As the day stretches on, you notice that the temple isn't just keeping track of goods. Some of the tablets being dried near the wall carry symbols that don't match any objects, abstract marks that might represent sounds or ideas. They're the linguistic equivalent of a child learning that words can rhyme, that cat and hat share something unseen. You're witnessing the birth of language on clay. Nearby, a priest murmurs a blessing over a new batch of tablets destined for the temple archives. He sprinkles fine sand over them so they won't stick together. The room smells faintly of dust and incense. The scribes bow their heads briefly before returning to work, not because they're deeply religious, but because if one more tablet breaks before drying, someone's going to lose their temper. You take a seat on a low bench near the doorway, watching them for a long while. The light shifts slowly, changing from gold to copper to gray. You can almost feel the centuries compress. This quiet act of pressing symbols into clay will become the foundation of libraries, contracts, stories, even love letters. Every flick of the wrist, every stroke of the stylus is humanity inching closer to writing not just about things, but about thoughts. You lean back, closing your eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of it all. The styluses tapping like soft rain, the murmur of quiet concentration. If writing has a heartbeat, this is it. By the time the evening cool settles in, the courtyard is filled with rows of tablets laid out to dry. The last rays of sunlight skim their surfaces, turning the clay a deep honey color. You wander among them, careful not to disturb the patterns. Some of the marks are crisp, geometric. Others still bear faint hints of pictures. It's like watching evolution happen in slow motion, from image to symbol, from symbol to sound. One tablet catches your eye. Its surface bears not trade records, but what seems to be a list of offerings. And then, at the bottom, a tiny pictograph of a star. You ask the scribe about it. He shrugs and says something that might translate to decoration. But maybe it isn't. Maybe it's the first sign of someone realizing that writing could capture not just what exists, but what's imagined. The thought lingers as the night deepens. You imagine how heavy these tablets must become when stacked. Shelves of them, walls lined with clay, a city's entire memory baked and stored. If someone tried to back up their data, they'd need an ox cart. But maybe that's the beauty of it. Every piece of knowledge, every record is solid, physical, unerasable. You look down at your own hands, faintly dusted with clay, and realize you're holding a piece of humanity's first technology of thought. Before scrolls, before books, before the glowing screen you're staring at now, there was this, soft earth, reshaped to hold memory. As the stars blink into view over the silent river, you can't help but feel small and oddly comforted. These early scribes, surrounded by dust and noise, were doing the same thing we still do every day, trying to make meaning last. And somewhere in that quiet courtyard of clay and starlight, you hear it again, the soft tick, tick, tick of styluses pressing into history. The morning haze clings to the city like thin gauze, filtering the early light into soft amber tones. You find yourself walking toward the great temple complex, the heart of the city, the beating bureaucratic soul of Sumer. The streets are already alive with motion. Women carrying jars balanced perfectly on their heads, merchants shouting in sing-song voices, and somewhere in the distance, the faint rhythmic tapping of reeds on clay. That gentle percussion is calling you, the heartbeat of civilization. Today, you'll spend your hours in the company of a scribe, the quiet craftsman of memory, the one whose fingers turn wet mud into meaning. The temple looms ahead, built of sun-baked bricks, its ziggurat rising like a layered mountain above the flat plain. Inside, the air is cool, dim, and dry, filled with the soft, earthy scent of clay and the faint sweetness of oil lamps. You step through a narrow doorway, and there he is, your scribe, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by piles of half-dried tablets. His name, he tells you, is something that sounds like Ama Etem, though it's lost in translation. He looks young, maybe in his 20s, with arms toned from years of kneading clay rather than swinging swords. He greets you without looking up, still focused on the tablet before him. "You're just in time," he murmurs. "The clay is perfect today." He gestures for you to sit, and you settle beside him, feeling the cool grit of the floor beneath your hands. Before him lies a small wooden tray filled with fine silt from the riverbank, mixed carefully with water. He scoops up a lump and begins to knead it, his hands moving rhythmically. Squeeze, fold, press. The sound is wet, soft, deliberate. He works with care, removing tiny pebbles and bits of straw, humming quietly under his breath. "This," he says, holding up the lump, "is memory before it hardens." You smile, realizing that for him, writing isn't just a task, it's a ritual. The transformation of formless mud into something that holds thought. You watch as he flattens the lump onto a board, smoothing its edges with a thin piece of wood until it forms a small, neat rectangle. The surface glistens faintly in the morning light. Then comes the stylus, a reed cut to a sharp wedge, its tip glimmering with moisture. He holds it between thumb and forefinger like a brush and begins to press. The sound is soft but distinct, a steady tick, 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 like rain on a roof. Each mark is deliberate, a tiny impression angled just so. You can see the geometry in it, small triangles, lines, and curves, forming rows of wedge-shaped symbols. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. The Sumerians developed this wedge-shaped script, cuneiform, around 3000 BCE, and it remained in use for over 3,000 years. More than a dozen languages eventually borrowed it, from Akkadian to Hittite. What began as a few simple pictographs has now become the first true system of writing. You lean closer, watching the precision in his hand. His motions are fluid, practiced, and almost serene. But it's not just artistry, it's bureaucracy. Today's work, he tells you, is recording temple rations for the month. Measures of barley, jars of oil, allocations for workers and priests. You glance at the tablet, rows of marks marching neatly across the surface. It's not glamorous, but it's civilization in action. Without records like these, cities would crumble into chaos. You glance around the room. A few other scribes sit nearby, each working in silence, occasionally wiping sweat from their brows. The air hums with quiet concentration. On one side, a young apprentice struggles with his stylus, leaving crooked marks that make his master sigh audibly. The boy groans, scrapes away the mistake with the edge of a broken shard, and tries again. You can't help but chuckle, the ancient version of hitting backspace. Ama Atem notices your amusement. He'll learn, he says. We all start with crooked wedges. He pauses to stretch his fingers, cracking the knuckles one by one. These, he says, flexing his hands, are the tools of the gods. Then he grins, or at least the accountants of the gods. There's your quirky tidbit for this section. Temple scribes were often considered semi-sacred, not because they performed miracles, but because they could read and write, a skill only a tiny fraction of the population possessed. In a world where words had power, scribes were gatekeepers between mortals and the divine. Some even signed their tablets with little prayers like, "May the gods remember me." You imagine them as humble bureaucrats, hoping their paperwork doubles as a ticket to heaven. Ama Etem dips his stylus in water, smooths another patch of clay, and begins a new row. You notice that the lines are slightly curved, following the natural motion of his wrist. His handwriting, if you can call it that, has personality. The marks are tight and disciplined, suggesting pride in his craft. He points to one sign shaped like a wedge and a loop. This one means barley,
We write it more than anything else, he says with a wry smile. If the gods ever read our tablets, they'll think all we cared about was grain.
He laughed quietly. He's not wrong. Most of humanity's earliest written records are lists of goods: barley, oil, livestock, not poetry or philosophy. Civilization was founded on spreadsheets. Historians still argue whether these temple scribes understood the broader cultural significance of what they were doing. Did they see themselves as innovators or just clerks? Were they aware that they were forging the path of written language or simply following orders? You glance at Etem, the soft furrow in his brow, the calm focus in his movements. Maybe it doesn't matter. Sometimes greatness sneaks in through routine. By midday, the heat inside the temple grows heavy. The scribes wipe their faces with the edges of their sleeves. The clay dries faster now, forcing them to work quickly. Etem finishes one tablet, stamps it with his cylinder seal, a small roller carved with an intricate scene of animals and stars, and sets it aside on a rack. "This one's done," he says, almost tenderly. "Now it belongs to time." He begins another, this one smaller, a personal message from a merchant to his partner. He murmurs the words aloud as he writes them, short phrases, clipped and formal. It's strange to think that you're watching the earliest form of business correspondence, the ancestor of every email ever sent with "per my last message" in it. When he's finished, he folds a thin piece of clay over the tablet, sealing it like an envelope, and rolls his seal again across the surface. The impression gleams faintly in the dim light, his identity immortalized in miniature. You can't help but ask him if he ever worries his work will be forgotten, buried under dust someday. He chuckles softly, wiping clay from his fingers. "If it lasts, he says. "The river takes most things away, but the gods are fond of clay. It doesn't burn, it doesn't rot, it remembers." You sit there for a long moment, letting that thought settle. The idea that this simple, sun-baked material could outlast entire empires, that a handful of marks could carry a person's voice across 5,000 years. You reach out and trace one of the dried tablets with your fingertips. The indentations are shallow but firm. You can feel the rhythm of his stylus in every wedge, the pause where he thought, the pressure where he pressed too hard. It's not just writing, it's texture. As the sun lowers and the air cools, the scribes begin to pack away their tools. The temple falls quiet, save for the low hum of the evening wind through its corridors. Etem stacks his finished tablets neatly, one by one, and covers them with a linen cloth to keep the dust off. He glances at you, smiling faintly. "Tomorrow," he says, "we start again." You step outside into the fading light. The city stretches before you, smoky, golden, alive. Behind you, inside the temple, the first library of humanity is quietly hardening in the dark. The reeds have stopped tapping, but you can still hear their echo, like a memory embedded in the clay itself. You take one last look at the ziggurat rising against the twilight, and you realize something simple and profound. Writing began not with kings or poets, but with ordinary people trying to remember ordinary things. And in doing so, they taught the world how to remember itself. The evening breeze brushes against your face, carrying the scent of baked earth and oil lamps. Somewhere inside the temple, a scribe's last tablet cools in the dark, its surface set forever. The first bureaucracy has been born, and with it, the eternal hum of civilization's paperwork. The morning sun glows faintly over the city walls, and a dry breeze drifts through the narrow streets, carrying the smell of wet clay and oil lamps. Today, you find yourself outside a low mud brick building beside the temple complex, not a place of worship, but one of learning. It's the Aduba, the tablet house, the ancient world's version of a school. From inside, you hear the murmuring of voices, the scratch and press of styluses on clay, and the occasional sharp rebuke of a teacher correcting a careless hand. You step closer, peering through the doorway. The room is dim and warm, sunlight slanting through small openings in the walls. Inside, boys sit cross-legged in rows, each with a small clay tablet balanced on his knees. Some are no older than 10 or 12. Their fingers are stained with brown dust, their clothes spattered with specks of dried mud. The air is thick with focus and a little frustration. At the front of the room sits the Umiya, the master scribe, his posture straight and his eyes sharp. In front of him is a larger tablet with rows of perfect wedge-shaped impressions. Beside him lies a slender reed stylus, the tool that has shaped centuries of thought. His voice is calm but stern as he dictates, slowly, clearly. Write the sign for Lugal. It means king. Again. The students echo the word under their breath like a prayer, pressing their reeds into the clay with varying levels of success. Some strokes are neat, crisp, symmetrical. Others, well, they lean like tired reeds in the wind. You watch as one student frowns, scrapes his tablet smooth with the edge of a shard, and starts over again. Over and over, they repeat the marks, the angled wedges, the diagonal cuts, until the symbols begin to look less like pictures and more like rhythm. This is how writing is learned here, not by pen and paper, but by patience and pressure. The master scribe moves among his students, checking their work, correcting their posture, muttering small phrases of instruction. Hold the stylus upright. Don't press too deep. The wedge must be even. His tone is strict, but beneath it is something softer. The pride of one who knows he is passing on civilization's most sacred craft. You kneel beside one of the boys. His name, he tells you, is Ibisin. He's about 11, thin and serious. His small hands tremble slightly as he forms a line of cuneiform signs. You ask him how long he's been studying. 2 years, he says, without looking up. But my signs still look like a drunk ox stepped on them. You laugh quietly, but his teacher overhears and gives him a glare so sharp it could cut clay. The curriculum here is relentless. Students spend years memorizing not only the hundreds of cuneiform signs, but also their meanings, pronunciations, and grammatical forms. You learn that they copy from standard lists, tablets filled with columns of signs, words for animals, plants, professions, gods, tools. There are lists of legal terms, medical words, even jokes and proverbs. Every symbol must be known by heart. One proverb, written on the master's example tablet, catches your eye. A scribe who knows no tablet is a farmer without a plow. You can't help but smile. Even in 2000 BCE, teachers were still fond of metaphors about hard work. As the lesson continues, the room grows hotter, the air heavy with the smell of wet clay. Sweat drips down the students' faces as they press and press, trying to make their wedges uniform. The rhythmic tap, tap, tap fills the space, like the sound of gentle rain. Occasionally, one of the boys mutters a curse under his breath when a line goes crooked. The master doesn't look up. He's heard every variation of frustration before. Around midday, the lesson shifts from writing to recitation. The students put aside their tablets, straighten their backs, and begin to chant in unison. The words they recite are old, ancient hymns and lists of kings, stories of gods and heroes. They aren't just learning how to write, they're learning what matters enough to be written. The master paces slowly before them, occasionally correcting pronunciation or posture. A scribe, he reminds them, does not only press symbols, he presses order into the world. There's a sense of reverence in the air, not the worship of a god, but of knowledge itself. In this small room, civilization is being taught one wedge at a time. You realize that every written tradition, every poem, law, and letter that followed in history was built on this foundation.
rows of sweating students struggling to make sense of marks in clay. But it's not all solemn discipline. When the teacher steps outside for a moment, the tension cracks. A few boys snicker quietly. One molds his leftover clay into the shape of a goat and sets it on his neighbor's knee. Another scribbles a crude drawing of a teacher with an oversized head. Ancient graffiti, the first doodle born from boredom. Ibisen catches your eye and grins mischievously. "If I survive this class," he whispers, "I'll write a law that says no one should have to copy Lugal more than 50 times." You laugh softly, careful not to draw attention. For all their solemn lessons, these are just children, and the human need to joke about schoolwork is evidently timeless. The teacher returns, and the room snaps back into order. The rest of the afternoon is spent copying a long passage from an older tablet, an exercise in endurance. Some of the boys' hands cramp from holding the stylus too tightly. Others fall behind, their eyes glazed with exhaustion. But no one dares to quit. Being trained as a scribe is a rare privilege. Most of their friends are out in the fields under the sun, herding sheep or carrying bricks. Here, inside these walls, they are learning the power of words, the ability to record debts, write prayers, draft laws. Literacy is not merely education, it's social ascent. Outside, the sun begins to dip low, painting the walls with gold. The master calls for the final review. Each student brings his tablet forward, laying it before him for inspection. The master examines each one in silence, occasionally nodding or frowning. When he reaches Ibisin's, he pauses. His eyes scan the lines carefully. Finally, he looks up. "These wedges," he says slowly, "are no longer the marks of a beginner." A small smile breaks across the boy's face, fleeting but genuine. It's a moment of quiet triumph, the reward of hours of repetition and aching hands. He bows slightly and steps back into line. The class ends. The students wipe their tablets clean, recycling the clay for tomorrow's work. The sound of scraping fills the room like soft rain. You realize that knowledge here is not stored on fragile parchment or paper. It's sculpted and erased daily, practiced and reformed, like a ritual of renewal. Before you leave, the master invites you to look at the oldest tablet in the Aduba. It sits on a small shelf, cracked and worn, but still legible. The wedges are deep and steady, the surface smooth as stone. "This was made by my teacher's teacher," he says. His hand is gone, but his mark remains. You trace one of the lines lightly. The impression feels cool and solid under your fingertip. It's astonishing. This thin slab of baked clay has outlived its maker by centuries, and still it speaks, silent but enduring. As you step outside into the fading light, the sound of the students' laughter echoes faintly behind you. The smell of the river drifts through the air. Somewhere beyond the temple, traders shout, oxen groan, and the city moves on, unaware that inside that small schoolhouse, the shape of human thought is being refined. You glance down at your hands, imagining the feel of a reed stylus between your fingers, the rhythm of pressing, lifting, pressing again, the slow formation of meaning. You understand now what the teacher meant. Every wedge pressed into clay is not just a symbol, it's a promise. A promise that what we think, what we dream, need not vanish when we do. The sky deepens into bronze and violet. You walk away from the Aduba, your mind quiet, the day's sounds fading into a soft hum. Behind you, in the warm glow of lamplight, small hands still work in silence, pressing the world into words. Evening settles over the city, soft and slow, the air cooling from its midday heaviness. The streets shimmer faintly in the dying light as the people of Uruk finish their trades and head home. You follow the sound of rhythmic tapping again, this time echoing from a larger courtyard near the temple complex.
The glow of oil lamps flickers on the walls, illuminating a dozen scribes hunched over low wooden tables, each surrounded by neat piles of clay tablets. The day's work never ends for the scribes. When everyone else rests, they record what has happened. Who delivered how much grain, which merchant owes taxes, which priest offered what to which god. You wander closer, and a young man looks up briefly, nodding a polite greeting before returning to his task. His stylus moves in swift, practiced motions, his expression calm and focused. He's copying an older tablet, line by line, symbol by symbol. Beside him, a small bowl of water keeps the clay damp enough to work with, and a shallow dish holds spare reeds. You watch him press a wedge, pause, and adjust the angle. There's no rush in his movements, just the patience of someone whose whole profession depends on precision. A temple official walks among the scribes, his sandals whispering softly across the floor. Every so often, he stops to inspect a tablet, holding it up to the lamplight. If it's good, he sets it aside on one pile. If it's poor, well, back it goes to be rewritten. You notice how thick the air feels with concentration. This is no casual craft, it's an act of devotion. Nearby, an older scribe mutters something about how the younger generation can't form a proper wedge to save their lives. His neighbor chuckles quietly without looking up. Even 5,000 years ago, workplace banter thrived. You crouch beside a table stacked high with tablets. The topmost one catches your eye, a list of offerings to the goddess Inanna: dates, sheep, beer, and something called fine oil. The lines are crisp, clean, and oddly soothing to read. There's a strange beauty in the repetition, the quiet assurance that everything, even the gifts to gods, has its place and measure. It's easy to forget, watching this scene, that writing here isn't just for record keeping. It's the backbone of power. The scribes don't just write, they define who owes what, who owns what, and what the gods demand. Without them, the temple would collapse into chaos. Every law, every contract, every promise depends on these little wedges. That's your mainstream historical fact for this stretch. By around 2500 BCE, scribes in Mesopotamia had become one of the most respected professional classes. They weren't merely clerks. They were administrators, historians, priests, and sometimes even poets. Being literate was as close to magic as you could get without calling yourself a god. One of the scribes looks up from his work and grins. "You ever try to copy a list of 400 fish types?" he says with mock exhaustion. "After the first 200, you start dreaming about gills." You laugh softly, imagining a tired man somewhere in 2500 BCE sighing over yet another tablet about seafood. A few feet away, another scribe is working on a different kind of document. Not a list, but a letter. You lean over and read the lines as he presses them. "To my esteemed friend in Lagash, may Enki bless your family and your cattle. I send word that your shipment of copper has arrived safely." It's a friendly tone, practical and polite. Yet it's remarkable. Here it is, the first hint of personal writing, communication between people far apart. No longer just marks for counting goods, but words for staying connected. The clay tablet, the simplest of tools, has become humanity's first inbox. You can't help but wonder what it must have felt like to receive such a letter, to hold a slab of baked earth in your hand and know that someone, days or weeks away, took the time to press thoughts into it just for you. The weight of the clay would have made the message feel solid, real. Unlike an email, you couldn't just delete it. You had to hold it, read it, feel it. Somewhere near the center of the courtyard, a small fire burns in a pith, not for warmth, but for baking tablets. A young apprentice carefully slides finished pieces near the coals, turning them so they harden evenly. The firelight dances across his face, reflecting in his eyes. Once baked, these tablets become nearly indestructible, a happy accident that would someday preserve their words for thousands of years. The process is slow, methodical, and a little dangerous. The clay must bake at just the right temperature. Too hot and it cracks, too cool and it stays soft. You watch as the apprentice blows gently on a glowing ember, whispering something under his breath, perhaps a prayer to keep the fire steady. A quirky tidbit emerges as you watch. In ancient Mesopotamia, the phrase "to bake a tablet" became shorthand for "to make it official." Once a tablet was baked, its contents were sealed forever. You could smooth a wet tablet clean and start again, but a baked one was permanent, like a contract written in stone. You can imagine someone back then saying, "You really want to bake that promise?" with the same tone people now use when signing a 30-year mortgage.
As the night deepens, the work slows. The scribes stretch their backs and wipe their hands. One jokes that his fingers are becoming wedges themselves. Another hums softly, an old tune about the god Enlil sending good fortune to careful hands. The temple official claps once, signaling the end of the session. The apprentices begin stacking the baked tablets carefully into reed baskets, ready to be carried to the archives.
You follow them, curious. The archive room is cool and quiet, its walls lined with rows of clay shelves. Thousands of tablets rest there, stacked like small bricks, labeled with tiny tags pressed into their corners. You walk between the rows, the smell of baked earth thick in the air. It feels sacred almost, the first library in history. The boy who baked the tablets earlier smiles proudly. "This is the memory of the temple," he says softly. "If the gods forget, the clay remembers." There's something haunting about that idea. The clay remembers. It holds everything, every trade, every prayer, every argument and apology. Even now, long after the scribes are dust, their words still whisper from the ground. Historians still argue whether these archives were truly public or kept under temple control. Were they meant for anyone to consult, or only for priests and officials? No one knows for sure. But standing here, surrounded by tablets stacked higher than your head, you can feel their weight, both literal and symbolic. The birth of bureaucracy, of history itself. As you brush your fingers across one cracked surface, the wedge marks feel like tiny ridges, smooth and cool. You imagine the hand that pressed them, the quiet concentration, the breath held steady before each stroke. And then you realize these were not just records of a society, they were the society. Outside, the night air is warm and still. You can hear the distant bleating of sheep, the splash of oars on the river, and the murmur of people preparing for sleep. The scribes blow out their lamps one by one. The courtyard empties. You linger a little longer, watching the last apprentice wipe his hands on a damp cloth and tuck his stylus behind his ear. He turns to leave, then pauses, looking at the shelves as though memorizing them. Maybe he knows that centuries from now, long after his name is forgotten, someone will dig these very tablets from the earth, still legible, still telling stories. You take one last look at the quiet archive. The lamplight fades. The walls seem to glow faintly, as if the clay itself holds the warmth of memory. You exhale slowly, feeling the calm weight of it all, the patience, the permanence, the quiet faith in marks made by hand. In this world, the pen may not yet exist, but the idea behind it already does. To write is to endure. The sun rises again over the flat horizon, spilling pale gold over the rooftops of Uruk. The air hums with life. The bray of donkeys, the distant ring of a hammer, the chatter of traders setting up their stalls. You find yourself near the temple complex once more, though this morning feels different. The scribes are not at their desks. Instead, a small crowd has gathered near the steps of a ziggurat. Clay tablets are being brought out, carefully in baskets and unwrapped from layers of woven reeds. The scene feels ceremonial, a public reading. A tall priest in white linen stands before the crowd, holding a freshly baked tablet. His voice is calm and measured as he begins to read, the words rolling out in a rhythm that feels both formal and familiar. It's not a story or a hymn, it's a decree, the temple's latest regulations about grain rations and property boundaries. The people listen, some with interest, others with polite boredom. A few nod approvingly, as if to say, "Yes, that sounds fair." You realize you're watching an early form of bureaucracy in action. Laws and records are no longer whispered or remembered. They're displayed, read aloud, and preserved in clay. That's your mainstream historical fact here. Writing had, by the mid-3rd millennium BCE, moved from simple accounting to administration. Temples and palaces used it to organize labor, track resources, and declare laws. Writing was now power, quiet, square, sun-dried power. You stand in the shade of a palm tree, listening as the priest reads about fields, depths, and oxen, his tone unchanging, as if the words themselves carried divine authority. People murmur agreement or mild discontent. When he finishes, the tablet is placed inside a sealed box and carried into storage. The priest nods once, satisfied. You turn to a man beside you, a farmer by the look of his clothes and the mud caked on his sandals. He sighs. "More tablets," he mutters. "Every year, more rules. Soon we'll need a tablet to breathe." You grin. Bureaucratic frustration, it seems, is older than civilization itself. As the crowd disperses, you follow a small group of temple clerks carrying tablets toward a side building. Inside, you find what might be called an office, though it looks nothing like the glass and paper kind you know. The room is lined with shelves, each holding clay tablets stacked like bread loaves. A few scribes sit cross-legged at low tables, sorting through piles, occasionally muttering to themselves as they check one against another. One of them waves you over and shows you a tablet marked with a complex grid, neat columns and rows of symbols. "Ration records," he says. "See here? Workers who build the ziggurat get oil, beer, and bread every day. The amount depends on rank." He points to the top line. 4 men get 2 measures of oil, 6 loaves, and a jar of beer. He moves down the list, where the symbols get smaller and the rations slimmer. Laborers get 1 of each. You raise an eyebrow. "So writing helps fairness?" He shrugs. "Depends who's writing." There's a faint smile on his face, but the point lands. Writing doesn't just record power, it creates it. Whoever controls the tablets controls truth. You pick up another piece from the table. It's thicker, heavier, and inscribed with a seal, the swirling image of a lion and a star. The scribe explains that seals are signatures. Each official has one, he says, showing you his. A small cylinder carved from lapis lazuli, polished smooth as glass. He rolls it across a fresh slab of clay, and the pattern appears. Perfect, intricate, unmistakable. This little cylinder, he tells you, is as valuable as gold. Lose it, and someone could stamp their own orders in your name. You can't help but think of passwords and digital signatures 5,000 years early. Humanity's anxieties, it seems, don't change much, only the materials. As he speaks, you notice another group of scribes nearby, gathered around a low table. They're arguing over a tablet, not angrily, but with scholarly intensity. One points to a line of symbols. "That mark means 10 measures, not 12, he insists. Another shakes his head. No, see the curve? That's clearly 12. Their supervisor sighs, rubbing his temples. "Historians still argue whether any of you know how to count," he mutters. The room bursts into quiet laughter. You realize you're witnessing one of the first moments of interpretation, the idea that written words might mean different things to different people. It's oddly comforting to know that even the first bureaucrats struggled with typos. Later in the day, you follow one of the clerks outside, where a caravan has arrived from a nearby city. Donkeys bray, traders shout, and the air fills with the smell of dust and sweat. The clerk greets the caravan leader warmly and exchanges tablets, one bearing a list of goods, the other a record of payment. The two men inspect each tablet carefully before nodding and sealing the deal with a cylinder roll. It's all remarkably organized. You can almost see the invisible web of clay stretching across the land. Records connecting temples, cities, and merchants. A network of information built on mud. And here comes the quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have discovered that some ancient couriers carried clay tablets inside small baked envelopes, clay cases stamped shut with seals. To read the message, the recipient had to break the outer shell, revealing the tablet within. It was, in essence, the first sealed mail. Some even came with duplicates stored at the sender's temple, just in case someone claimed they'd never received it. Bureaucracy meets security, 3000 BCE edition. As the afternoon sun turns harsh, you step into the shade of a stone wall, watching the scribes work. Their fingers move deftly, pressing wedge after wedge, pausing only to smooth the surface or wet the clay. The repetition feels almost meditative. You can sense a quiet pride in their task, a knowledge that their work holds weight, that their marks shape how the world remembers itself. And yet, beneath the calm order, there's something else. Fatigue, perhaps, or irony. You overhear one young scribe sigh to another. "We write about beer rations all day, but we never get any." His friend chuckles. "Maybe if we bake that law." The laughter drifts like warm air. By evening, the work is done. The clerks tidy their shelves, dusting off old tablets and sliding new ones into place. You notice that some of the oldest pieces, cracked, faded, their edges chipped, are treated with special care. The chief scribe calls them ancestor tablets. They record the earliest transactions of the temple, and though they're no longer legally binding, they are revered like family heirlooms. He hands one to you, the surface faintly rough, the marks shallow with age. You can still make out a few symbols, a sheaf of grain, a jar, a number. It's humble, but it's also history. Proof that 5,000 years ago, someone made sure every loaf of bread was accounted for. The chief scribe watches you examine it. "People think we work with words," he says softly, "but really, we work with memory." You nod slowly, understanding. The weight of the tablet in your hands feels heavier now. Not just clay, but continuity. Outside, the sun dips low, staining the sky with gold and rose. Workers head home, laughter echoing through the streets. The smell of baking bread mingles with smoke from evening fires. The scribes linger a little longer, stacking their day's work neatly. Then, one by one, they blow out their lamps and leave. You remain for a moment in the quiet, surrounded by rows of silent tablets. The light fades and the air cools. You think of all the people these little slabs have outlasted. The priests, the kings, the farmers, even the scribes themselves. The clay remains, steady and patient, holding the marks of lives long gone. For all its bureaucracy and precision, there's something deeply human about it. The desire to record, to preserve, to say, "I was here, and this mattered." You run your thumb over the edge of one tablet. The surface is smooth where countless hands have touched it. The last rays of sunlight flicker across the marks, turning them briefly to gold. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays. Someone calls out for supper, and you stand quietly among the first archives of human civilization, surrounded by the soft rustle of memory, clay whispering to clay. The city of Uruk breathes slowly under the starlit sky. Night has settled like a cool veil, softening the clamor of the day. Torches flicker near the ziggurat's base, casting long orange reflections across the baked clay walls. The hum of the marketplace has faded,
replaced by the murmurs of families sharing their evening meals. You wander along a narrow street paved with uneven bricks, the scent of roasted barley and sweet date wine drifting from open courtyards. Above you, the stars burn bright, the same constellations that guided farmers and priests thousands of years ago. In this ancient darkness, without the glow of modern lights, the heavens feel impossibly vast.
You pause near a small shrine at the edge of the street. A woman kneels before it, offering a few drops of oil to a clay figurine, perhaps a household god. Her motions are slow, almost sleepy, her lips moving in a whispered prayer. Beside her, a child holds a small clay lamp, eyes wide with curiosity. The flame trembles in the breeze, and for a moment, you're struck by how tender this simple act feels. A quiet exchange between fear and faith, hope and habit. Inside her home, you glimpse shelves lined with small figures, gods for protection, fertility, and good harvest. The woman's husband sits nearby, repairing a fishing net under the lamplight, while an older relative hums a soft lullaby. The tune is simple and repetitive, the kind that drifts easily into dreams. And this is where the story of the night in ancient Mesopotamia begins, not in grand palaces or temples, but in the gentle rhythm of domestic life. In the dim light of an oil lamp, homes come alive in quiet ways. A pot simmers over a low fire, filling the air with the earthy scent of lentils and onions. Someone smooths clay to make a jar. Another hums while grinding grain on a stone slab. The architecture itself feels intimate. Mud brick walls, reed mats, clay floors. Windows are small, just enough to let in air but not dust. The roof often doubles as a sleeping place. Flat and open, it offers relief from the day's heat. Tonight, a few families are already spreading their woven mats under the stars. You climb up a nearby ladder to the rooftop of a small home and settle down beside a family preparing for bed. The father looks up at the sky, tracing constellations with his finger. That one, he says to his son, is the Great Bull. When it rises, the floods are near. The boy nods solemnly, as if memorizing the lesson for life. The stars, to these people, are more than decoration. They are calendars, clocks, even deities. The priests of Uruk study their movements carefully, noting when certain stars appear or vanish on the horizon. These patterns guide planting, harvesting, and rituals. And here's your factual anchor. Mesopotamians were among the first people to systematically observe the heavens. Their star maps, scratched on clay tablets, would later influence Babylonian and even Greek astronomy. But tonight, it's not science, it's wonder. The sky is a living story, whispered down through generations. You lie back on the cool roof tiles, listening to the city's soft pulse. Somewhere, a dog barks. From the temple, a faint song drifts, low, steady, like a heartbeat. It's the night hymn of Inanna, goddess of love and the morning star. The priests sing it every evening before sleep. The melody is repetitive and calming, designed to echo across the streets, a lullaby for the city itself. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can imagine an entire civilization breathing in time with this song. A few hours later, you find yourself near the riverbank. The night is cool and alive with sound. Frogs croak in the reeds, insects buzz softly, and water laps against the shore. A group of young men sit nearby, talking quietly, passing around a jug of beer. Their laughter is subdued but warm. One of them gestures toward the distant ziggurat, its outline barely visible against the sky. "Do you think the gods ever sleep?" he asks. His friend chuckles. "If they did, we'd all be in trouble." You smile at their banter. Even in the earliest cities, people wondered about divine fatigue, about whether their gods shared human needs. These late-night conversations by the water, lighthearted, philosophical, and half-serious, are the ancestors of all our stargazing thoughts and campfire questions. As the group settles into silence, one of them begins to hum a slow tune. It's a working song, the kind sung by laborers building the ziggurat during the day. The rhythm is hypnotic, steady, circular, endless. Without realizing it, you start to feel drowsy. The clay, the river, the stars, everything in this world moves at the same calm pace. The city isn't silent, but it's serene, a soft murmur of life instead of chaos. Further down the river, you notice a small light flickering inside a workshop. The door is open, and inside, a craftsman works even at this late hour. His hands move with care as he shapes a lump of clay into a small tablet. The faint scent of wet earth and ash fills the room. He's not a scribe, just a humble potter who learned a little cuneiform to mark his wares. You watch as he presses symbols into the damp clay, his name, the date, and a short prayer for prosperity. He glances up at you and smiles. "Words protect," he says simply, even if no one reads them. You realize how writing, once the tool of priests and kings, has trickled down to the common craftsman. It's becoming part of everyday life, not just for administration, but for identity, even comfort. The potter places the tablet beside his kiln and wipes his hands. The night outside hums softly, and he looks content. "Tomorrow," he says, "I'll fire them all together, the bowls, the lamps, the words." It's a poetic image, civilization itself being baked into permanence while the world sleeps. A breeze picks up, carrying the smell of wet clay and river reeds. You make your way back toward the city, where the sounds are fading further. Even the animals are quiet now. The fires in courtyards have burned down to embers, and faint trails of smoke curl upward like whispers to the sky. On one street, you pass a group of night watchmen, men carrying torches, their shadows long and soft against the walls. They nod to you, murmuring greetings, before turning down another alley. Their duty is to keep the peace and guard against thieves or fire. Theirs is an old and weary job, one shared by generations before and after them. A few homes still glow faintly from within. You pause near one open doorway and see a scribe sitting beside a lamp copying a tablet. His wife sleeps nearby, their baby curled at her side. The scribe dips his stylus, presses a few wedges, then stops to stretch his tired hand. His expression is gentle, thoughtful. He whispers to himself as he works, reading each word softly. Not for the gods, not for his employers, but for himself. Maybe he's copying a hymn, maybe a story. The words fall into the clay with quiet finality. He sets the stylus down, looks at the lamp flame for a long time, then blows it out. The darkness is complete now. You climb once more to a rooftop overlooking the city. The ziggurat stands in the distance, dark and monumental. The Tigris glimmers faintly, reflecting the stars. From up here, the city feels timeless, a constellation of small fires flickering against the infinite sky. You think of all the people below, the sleeping farmers, the weary scribes, the potters and priests, all resting under the same blanket of stars. Each of them carries within them a small spark of hope, for good harvests, for love, for tomorrow's safety. And those hopes, whispered into clay and song, are what truly built this civilization. Even now, thousands of years later, their quiet nights echo in the written words they left behind. A cool wind brushes past. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere, a flute begins to play. Soft, slow, almost a lullaby. The melody floats over the rooftops, weaving through the night air, until it's hard to tell whether it comes from a real musician or from the memory of all those who ever played before. The stars gleam a little brighter, as if listening too. The song fades and the city sleeps. You remain there for a while, breathing in the ancient calm. The world feels still, heavy with memory, yet light with peace. And in that silence, you understand something simple and eternal. Civilization began not with war or conquest, but with sleep, song, and the soft glow of an oil lamp. The quiet promise that tomorrow will come and that someone will remember. Morning arrives with the faint shimmer of sunlight glancing off the Euphrates. The air is thick with warmth even at dawn, and you can already hear the city stirring. Donkeys braying, merchants calling, pottery clinking in courtyards. The smell of baked bread mixes with the earthy scent of damp clay. You stretch your arms and watch as traders gather near the city gate. They're loading their carts with goods wrapped in woven reed mats. Jars of oil, bundles of linen, baskets of dried figs, and, tucked between them, stacks of clay tablets. It seems strange at first. Clay tablets hardly seem like trade goods, but in this world, words travel as surely as spices or silver. A merchant, his beard streaked with gray, pats the side of his donkey and gestures toward the road ahead. North, he says to his companions, to Mari, then to Ebla. The kings there love our scribes' work. You realize that these tablets are not just records, but letters, correspondence between cities, kingdoms, and temples spread across the ancient Near East. You follow the caravan as it sets out. The wheels creak, the animals grunt, and dust rises behind them. Soon, the walls of the city fade into the horizon, replaced by open fields and the occasional cluster of palm trees. The road follows the course of the river, winding like a ribbon of life through the dry plains. As you walk, the merchant begins to hum a slow, rhythmic tune, a travel song meant to set the pace of their journey. His assistant joins in, and soon the whole caravan hums together, creating a sound that feels ancient and steady, like the heartbeat of civilization itself. You think about how much of early writing depended on movement, on trade, messengers, and journeys like this. After all, what good are records if they never travel beyond the city walls? By midday, the caravan stops near a shaded grove to rest. You sit beneath a palm tree while the traders unpack their cargo. One of them opens a small basket and carefully removes a wrapped bundle of cloth. Inside are several clay tablets, each about the size of your hand, covered with rows of tiny wedges. These, he says proudly, are letters for the governor of Mari, reports of grain, taxes, and temple offerings, written by our best scribe. You take one in your hand. It's surprisingly heavy, solid, cool to the touch. The writing looks impossibly neat, each wedge identical, each line perfectly straight. The man grins. We carry the words of kings, he says, and sometimes gossip. You raise an eyebrow, and he chuckles. Oh yes, the rulers send love letters too, and threats, and recipes for beer sometimes. You laugh softly. It's oddly comforting to realize that even 4,000 years ago, people still mixed bureaucracy with boredom and romance. That's your quirky tidbit for the section. Archaeologists have actually found clay tablets with everything from royal flirtations to cooking instructions. One tablet from the city of Mari, for instance, records a wife scolding her husband for not writing enough. An ancient you never call anymore moment preserved in clay. The trader wraps the tablets again, tucks them safely away, and lies down to nap in the shade. The sound of cicadas fills the air. You rest beside him, watching the reeds sway gently in the river breeze. When you wake, the sun has softened into gold. It's time to move again. As the caravan continues, you notice something new. Every so often, they stop at small way stations, clusters of huts where other merchants rest and exchange goods. At one such post, a local scribe sits under a canopy, surrounded by clay tablets laid out like flatbread to dry. Travelers stop to dictate messages, which he scratches into fresh clay and stamps with small cylinder seals. You watch him at work. His fingers are steady, his stylus quick. Each tablet, he explains, is made from the same river mud found in every corner of Mesopotamia. So no matter where one travels, a message can always be read or rewritten. Clay is our paper, he says, and it never forgets. You think about that for a moment. A letter carved into stone feels eternal, but clay, soft, humble, temporary, has somehow become humanity's most enduring messenger.
He slides a freshly written tablet toward you. Try, he offers. You press a few careful marks into the surface. It's harder than it looks. The clay grips the stylus, and every line must be precise. Still, when you look down, you recognize your own pattern, crude but legible. You've just written in a script older than almost any living language. The scribe smiles. It means traveler, he says. That's what you are, yes? You nod.
Historians still argue whether long-distance communication like this created the first real sense of diplomacy, or whether it was just another layer of trade. Either way, these traveling tablets laid the groundwork for something remarkable: the world's first international correspondence network. By evening, the caravan reaches the ancient city of Mari. You cross the outer wall and find yourself in a place that feels alive with movement and voices. Merchants shout prices. Donkeys clatter through narrow alleys. Women carry jars of water on their heads. In the air hangs a mix of spice, smoke, and sweat. At the palace gate, the traders unload their cargo. A young official, dressed in linen and gold, inspects the bundles. He takes the basket of tablets with particular care and disappears inside. You follow him into a long, cool hallway that smells faintly of incense and clay. Inside the palace archive, rows of shelves stretch into shadow, each lined with hundreds of tablets. Some are stacked neatly, others spill from baskets. It's a world of organized chaos. The scribes here work like bees, their styluses clicking softly against the clay. The sound is hypnotic, a low, rhythmic tapping, like distant rain. One of them, noticing you, gestures for you to come closer. "We are translating messages from the south," he explains. "Trade requests, weather reports, omens." He points to a tablet on his desk. This one says, "The river rose early this year. The gods are pleased." He smiles faintly. "The gods always get credit when the crops are good." You chuckle, and he continues, "These messages travel for weeks, even months. Yet they survive storms, wars, and time. Paper would crumble, but clay endures." He picks up another tablet, older, cracked. "Some of these will still be here long after our kings are dust." There's a quiet pride in his voice. You realize that scribes like him must have felt a kind of immortality in their craft. They were not just record keepers, they were preservers of existence. Later, as the night settles over Mari, you sit near the palace courtyard. The air smells of baked bread and river mist. Across from you, a messenger prepares for his journey to Egypt. His satchel is filled not with scrolls, but with tiny, heavy clay envelopes, each tablet wrapped in a thin layer of clay, sealed and stamped. He explains how the system works. A king writes a message on one tablet, covers it with another thin layer of clay, and seals it with his royal mark. The recipient must break the outer shell to read the message, ensuring authenticity. It's an ancient form of security, a password made of earth. As the messenger ties his pack closed, you can't help but admire the simplicity and brilliance of it. Every step of this communication system, from tablet to seal to delivery, is a thread in the fabric of civilization. He mounts his donkey and looks back. "If I'm lucky," he says, "I'll see the Nile before these words turn to dust." You watch as he disappears into the desert night, carrying a bundle of baked mud that holds the thoughts of a king. As the stars rise over Mari, you realize that you've witnessed something extraordinary, the first great web of written connection. Long before the internet, before parchment or pen, the world spoke through clay and courier. Messages crossed mountains, deserts, and seas, all pressed into small tablets that could fit in your hand. Empires rose and fell, but the words kept traveling, baked, buried, and rediscovered thousands of years later. And the most poetic truth of all? Some of those tablets still exist. Archaeologists in the modern age have found them in palace archives, their messages still readable. A few are even friendly notes between rulers, the ancient equivalent of diplomatic emails. You lean back against the palace wall, listening to the distant hum of the city. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another caravan is already on the move. Another scribe is pressing another tablet. Another story is beginning. The river glints in the moonlight, carrying the reflection of a world learning to speak, one wedge at a time. Dawn creeps over the horizon like a quiet whisper, softening the shadows along the riverbank. The Tigris glitters in pale gold, reflecting the first hints of sunlight. The city stirs slowly, still wrapped in the gentle rhythm of early morning. Merchants emerge with their baskets of dates and barley. Water carriers balance jars on their heads, and farmers trudge from the fields with tired but steady steps. The air smells faintly of wet clay and river mud, mingling with the aroma of baking bread from homes nearby. You wander through the narrow streets, observing a different rhythm of life today, the quiet pulse of scribes beginning their morning work. Unlike the bustling markets, their spaces are calm, organized, and filled with the low tapping of styluses against clay. You follow the sound to a courtyard that functions as both a workshop and a learning space, where young apprentices are practicing their first lines of cuneiform under the watchful eyes of their teachers. The room is warm, dust motes dancing in the sunlight that streams through narrow windows. Boys and girls alike bend over small clay tablets, pressing styluses carefully, measuring each wedge with the precision of craftsmen. A teacher moves slowly among them, murmuring corrections in a soft voice. Not too deep, he advises, and remember, the wedge must lean just so. The students adjust their posture, straighten their backs, and begin again, the repeated tapping creating a hypnotic rhythm. You pause to watch a young girl, no older than 10, pressing her tablet with careful diligence. Her name is Enheduanna, she tells you. Her father is a minor priest in the temple. She hopes to become a scribe one day, to read the tablets her elders cannot. There's a flicker of pride in her eyes as she explains that writing allows her to speak across time, to leave a trace of herself long after she is gone. Historians still argue whether girls in Mesopotamia regularly trained as scribes or if it was an exceptional privilege. But for Enheduanna, the opportunity feels sacred. You watch as she carefully forms a wedge that marks the symbol for king. It's imperfect, a little crooked, but steadying her hand, she presses the next line. Nearby, a boy whispers to his neighbor, "I think my wedge looks like a crooked fish." His friend giggles softly, and you can't help but smile. Even 5,000 years ago, students were struggling with handwriting complaints that sound surprisingly modern. The teacher moves to a small table where a basket of freshly baked clay tablets waits. These are not exercises. They are records of real transactions, letters, and lists. Each tablet is unique, yet they all follow the same careful logic. A scribe's work is more than technique. It is devotion. The wedges must be precise because they hold memory itself. One small error could misrepresent a shipment of grain, a tax payment, or a dedication to a deity. You take a deep breath, inhaling the subtle aroma of clay warmed by the sun. There's something meditative in the repetition of marks, in the patient shaping of meaning. The room feels suspended in time, as though every wedge pressed into the surface of a tablet is a heartbeat, echoing across centuries. A senior scribe approaches, carrying a tablet he has been working on since dawn. It's a complex administrative document, detailing the distribution of goods to several temples along the river. He places it on the table before Enheduanna and instructs her to copy it, carefully, line by line. The pressure of responsibility is visible on her face, but she bends over her stylus with focus and determination. The document itself is mundane, lists of barley, jars of oil, sheep, and bread, but in its simplicity lies civilization. Without such records, commerce would be chaotic, disputes impossible to resolve, and temples could not function effectively. Each wedge pressed into clay is an act of order, a small victory over the uncertainty of human life. You notice another peculiar detail. Some of the tablets contain small, personal notes tucked into the margins. One reads, "Do not forget to eat." Another says, "The donkey is stubborn today." Historians still argue whether these annotations were meant as reminders, jokes, or messages between scribes. Either way, it humanitizes the work, a small window into lives often obscured by bureaucracy. Outside, the river reflects the clear morning sky. You step for a moment onto the bank, feeling the cool mud beneath your feet. The city behind you hums with quiet activity. Farmers move along the edges of fields. Children chase each other near the water, and the distant call of a priest resonates from the temple steps. You can almost hear the rhythm of the city itself. The tapping of styluses, the clatter of carts, the murmurs of traders, the gentle lapping of water, all blending into a calm, steady heartbeat. Back inside, the students continue their exercises. One boy has formed a wedge that resembles the symbol for God. He leans back and glances proudly at the teacher, who nods approvingly. A girl corrects a neighbor's mistake, quietly whispering guidance. The room feels collaborative, disciplined, yet alive with small bursts of humor and encouragement. You realize that the training of scribes is more than technical mastery. It's also a transmission of culture, memory, and ethics. A scribe learns not just to write, but to preserve the truth of their community, to record agreements faithfully, and to honor the gods in careful detail. Each tablet carries not only information, but intention, the very essence of order and meaning. A senior scribe stands at the doorway, stretching his arms as the sun climbs higher. He surveys the room and smiles faintly, satisfied. "The next generation will carry our words farther than we ever could," he says. "They will travel, record, and endure." His voice is soft but carries a weight of certainty. You watch as Enheduanna finishes her tablet and places it carefully on a drying rack. It will be baked soon, preserved for years, perhaps centuries. You think of the countless tablets waiting in archives across the city, each one holding traces of lives, transactions, prayers, and dreams. Clay has become a repository of memory, a medium that outlives human lifespans. The young scribes take a break, stretching their hands and sharing small morsels of bread and dates. Laughter drifts across the courtyard as they tease one another over crooked wedges and misaligned lines. You realize that despite the meticulous nature of their work, they are children first, carrying curiosity and humor into every lesson. As the morning wanes, you step back into the streets, feeling the warmth of the sun on your shoulders. The city hums around you, the same city that has nurtured writing for generations, where clay tablets are both tools and companions, preserving knowledge, trade, law, and life itself. You pause, breathing in the rich scent of the river and baked earth. Every step you take resonates with the weight of human endeavor. Every sound, a soft echo of a civilization committed to recording itself. And as you look toward the horizon, you understand a quiet truth. The wedges pressed into clay today by hands like Enheduanna's are the very foundations upon which history will remember. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows over the city of Uruk, painting the mud brick walls in soft amber tones. The river glimmers lazily in the distance, reflecting the sky's shifting colors as birds wheel above. You wander through narrow streets, feeling the warm dust beneath your sandals, and notice the quiet rhythm of daily life. Women carrying jars of water, children playing in the alleys, and merchants packing up their goods for the evening. Your path leads you to a small open courtyard tucked behind the bustling marketplace. Here, a group of scribes has gathered, preparing tablets for the temple archive. Unlike the earlier classroom exercises, these tablets carry official records, lists of temple offerings, grain distributions, and correspondence between distant cities. The air smells faintly of wet clay, mixed with the earthy aroma of nearby cooking fires. You watch a scribe pick up a tablet, his fingers steady and precise. Each wedge pressed into the clay carries weight. It is law, memory, and devotion all at once. He hums softly as he works, a quiet melody that seems to harmonize with the distant chatter of the city and the soft lap of water on the riverbank. A younger apprentice leans over another tablet, whispering corrections to himself as he attempts to copy a complex list of cattle distributions. His stylus slips slightly, leaving a wedge out of place, and he groans quietly. The senior scribe shakes his head with a faint smile. "Patience," he says softly. "The clay will forgive you, but history may not." And there it is, the subtle tension that comes with working in permanence. Writing on clay is a deliberate act. Mistakes can be corrected in the wet stage, but once baked, the tablet becomes fixed. It is a daily lesson in responsibility, in care, and in the quiet humility of preserving truth. You notice that some tablets are not administrative at all. A small pile near the corner contains stories, poems, and hymns. One tablet holds a hymn to Inanna, inscribed carefully line by line, the wedges forming intricate patterns that seem almost musical. Another tablet contains a short narrative about a merchant's journey along the Euphrates, detailing obstacles, discoveries, and encounters. These personal touches suggest that even amidst bureaucracy, humans have always sought to leave traces of creativity. Historians still argue whether these literary tablets were widely read or largely confined to temple circles. But the presence of both administrative and creative texts illustrates an important truth. Writing serves multiple purposes. It is practical, ceremonial, communicative, and expressive all at once. Nearby, a scribe laughs softly as he inscribes a note in the margin of a grain record. The cat stole the goat's portion again. The senior scribe glances over, shaking his head but smiling. You can't help but chuckle. Even in the earliest professional writing, humor sneaks into the margins, humanizing work that might otherwise feel dry. You wander closer to observe the sealing process. Small cylinder seals carved from lapis lazuli or stone are rolled across fresh clay to leave a unique mark. Each seal functions as a signature, authenticating the contents of the tablet. You watch a scribe pick up a finished tablet, roll the seal carefully across its edge, and nod in satisfaction. The impression is crisp and complete, a tactile guarantee of authenticity. It's fascinating to realize that in an age without paper, pens, or envelopes, these simple tools created trust across vast distances. A tablet with a seal could travel for weeks, even months, to another city, carrying the weight of authority and verification. Some were even duplicated at the temple to serve as backup records, a proto-archival system centuries ahead of its time. As the sun sinks lower, the courtyard glows with golden light. A young apprentice pauses to watch the shadows lengthen, running his fingers over the smooth surface of a recently baked tablet. "It feels alive," he whispers to himself, "like it remembers everything we do." And in a way, it does. Clay tablets are memory incarnate, practical, enduring, and intimate. They preserve mundane transactions, spiritual devotion, and the small, fleeting moments of everyday life. That small phrase in the margin, the tiny doodle beside a number, or the careful alignment of lines all testify to a civilization aware of the power of memory. You follow one scribe carrying a stack of finished tablets to the archive room. The shelves are packed floor to ceiling, each row meticulously labeled with dates and contents. The room smells faintly of clay and dust, a scent that seems to seep into your thoughts, slowing time and lending weight to every step. Inside, the archivist moves carefully, sliding tablets into place. He runs a finger along a shelf, pausing to smooth a slightly crooked piece. Every tablet tells a story, he murmurs, almost to himself. Not just the words, but the hand that pressed them. You feel the quiet reverence in his voice and understand that in these shelves rests the lifeblood of the city, its memory, governance, and soul. Outside, the late afternoon light softens into evening. The streets hum with quieter activity. Families carry food to their homes. Children chase each other in the fading glow, and the river reflects the colors of the sunset like liquid gold. The scribes finish their day, wiping hands on damp cloths and setting styluses aside. One by one, lamps are extinguished, leaving only the soft glow of twilight. A soft breeze carries the faintest sounds of the city settling into rest. Somewhere, a dog barks, distant laughter floats on the air, and the smell of cooking fires lingers. You pause near the courtyard entrance and take it all in. The rhythm of life, the gentle precision of scribes, the quiet weight of memory pressed into clay. There's a strange poetry in watching work so methodical, so careful, unfold in such a peaceful human scale. You realize that the act of writing, mundane, deliberate, sacred, is both labor and art. It is the quiet heartbeat of civilization. A senior scribe glances toward the setting sun and sighs. Another day, he murmurs, wrote the world a little more firmly into clay. You smile, knowing that thousands of years later, people will hold these tablets, marvel at their endurance, and feel the hands that shaped them. You lean against a wall, watching the last light fade over Uruk. The city settles into evening calm, and you feel a profound sense of continuity, the hum of life, the rhythm of work, the persistence of memory, all pressed into humble clay, waiting patiently for centuries. Night falls gently over Uruk, settling the city into a hush. The air is cooler now, carrying the faint smell of wet clay from the riverbank, mingled with the scent of roasted barley from fires in distant courtyards. Lanterns glow softly in the alleys, casting flickering shadows that dance across mud brick walls. You wander slowly, feeling the cobblestones cool beneath your feet as the rhythm of the city shifts from activity to repose. Along the river, a few late fishermen make their way home, carrying small catches in woven baskets. Their voices are low, almost whispers, discussing the day's luck and plans for the morrow. Children still play near the edges of fields, but their laughter is subdued, careful not to disturb the quiet unfolding of night. You notice the subtle sounds you hadn't before, the distant croak of frogs, the gentle rustle of reeds in the breeze, the soft clatter of a jar rolling as someone closes their door. You make your way toward the temple district, where scribes are performing the final tasks of the day. Their movements are deliberate and slow, hands brushing over clay tablets to ensure every wedge is pressed just right, every seal rolled evenly. The soft clicking of styluses on clay echoes through the corridor like a distant lullaby. A young scribe, no older than 12, sits cross-legged, finishing a small batch of tablets. He dips a tiny brush into water to smooth the edges, murmuring softly under his breath. His concentration is absolute, and yet there's a delicate humor in the way he occasionally glances up, noticing a fellow apprentice's mistakes, and then rolling his eyes with exaggerated patience. Even 5,000 years ago, the struggle for perfection is tinged with small human amusement. Nearby, a more experienced scribe carefully rolls his cylinder seal across a freshly baked tablet. The impression is perfect, a detailed depiction of a lion and a star, symbols of authority and divine favor. He slides the tablet into a basket, careful not to disturb the others beside it. These tablets will be stored overnight in the archive, safe from the elements and ready for the next day's work. Historians still argue whether these archives were organized primarily for practical use, ceremonial preservation, or both. But the care and methodical structure suggest a respect for permanence, a recognition that the words they preserve may outlive the scribes themselves. You walk to the edge of the temple courtyard, noticing a small fire where a priest tends to a modest offering. He sprinkles oil over the embers, murmuring a quiet prayer to Inanna. The flames flicker, illuminating his face in warm, golden light. It's a ritual performed countless times, and yet each gesture carries a profound sense of devotion. You realize that both scribes and priests are engaged in acts of preservation. One preserving memory and law, the other faith and tradition.
A scribe approaches with a bundle of tablets, whispering instructions to a pair of apprentices. Make sure these records of grain deliveries are aligned perfectly, he says. The next governor will check every mark. His voice is calm, but carries authority. The apprentices nod and begin their careful work, brushing away stray clay particles and smoothing edges. In the corner, a stack of older tablets catches your attention. Their surfaces are worn, the wedges shallow from countless touches, edges chipped from centuries of handling. One particularly ancient tablet bears a list of temple offerings, grain, oil, and beer, meticulously recorded in a neat column. You can almost imagine the original scribe pressing each wedge with deliberate care, knowing that their work was both mundane and eternal. As you watch, a small debate arises among the apprentices. One points to a symbol on a tablet and insists it represents 10 measures of grain. Another argues it must be 12, citing the style of the wedge. Their teacher leans over, sighs, and mutters, "Historians still argue whether you two will ever agree." A quiet laughter ripples through the room, blending with the soft tapping of styluses and the distant murmur of nightbirds. The presence of humor amidst precision feels comforting. You recognize that the act of writing, even in its most serious forms, is inherently human, structured, disciplined, and yet always capable of subtle mischief or warmth. Outside, a gentle wind sweeps across the rooftops. The city seems to exhale, as if acknowledging the careful work of the day. You notice a small child asleep on a mat beside a lamplit doorway, the soft rise and fall of their chest matching the rhythm of the night. Nearby, a woman hums a lullaby, the melody drifting faintly through the courtyard. Returning to the archive room, you notice a scribe placing the day's finished tablets into storage. Each one is arranged carefully, not just for safety, but for accessibility. The order of tablets is as important as their content. Records must be found quickly when disputes arise, whether about grain, taxes, or temple offerings. You can see the thoughtfulness behind every placement, a silent recognition that memory, even baked in clay, is fragile if neglected. A soft conversation begins among the older scribes about the tablets they have recently discovered in distant cities. They speak of letters from kings, trade contracts, and hymns, marveling at the survival of messages carried over vast distances. One scribe chuckles. Some letters traveled hundreds of miles, across deserts and rivers, and still remain clearer than some people's handwriting today. You smile at the thought, realizing that human nature hasn't changed much. The struggle to communicate clearly, reliably, and with a touch of artistry persists across millennia. A small apprentice finishes polishing a tablet and places it carefully on a drying rack.
The wet clay glimmers in the lantern light. He glances at the senior scribe and whispers, "It feels alive, as if it remembers everything we do." The teacher nods silently, a faint smile on his face. The night deepens. The city hums with a gentle quiet, punctuated by the occasional croak of a frog, the soft bleating of goats, or the distant bark of a dog. From the river, a soft splash marks a fish breaking the surface. The scribes finish their work and extinguish lamps one by one, leaving only the moonlight to illuminate the archive room. You pause, taking in the serene atmosphere. Every tablet, every wedge, every mark pressed into clay represents an unbroken chain of human effort and memory. Each act of writing is a commitment to permanence, a whisper across time, a conversation with the future. You realize that the scribe's careful hands are literally shaping the story of civilization. Stepping outside, you look toward the river. The stars have emerged fully, twinkling like distant fires. The city rests, yet its heartbeat, the rhythm of human diligence, devotion, and care, continues invisibly beneath the surface. You feel the profound stillness of this moment, the quiet triumph of knowledge preserved in clay, and the gentle reassurance that what has been recorded will endure. And in the cool night air, carrying the faint scent of clay, river, and fire, you understand the simple beauty of human persistence, that even in the smallest, most mundane actions, civilization asserts itself, leaving traces that will echo across millennia. The following morning greets you with a soft haze over the city of Uruk, the sunlight glancing gently off the river like liquid gold. The streets are quiet, but gradually come alive with familiar routines. Donkeys bray in the marketplace, merchants arrange jars of oil and baskets of dates, and the scent of freshly baked bread drifts through narrow alleys. You notice that even in these simple moments, there is a rhythm to life, a kind of measured poetry that seems to rise naturally from the interplay of people, clay, and river. Your steps lead you toward the temple district, where scribes are beginning their daily work. They carry small baskets filled with damp clay tablets, each one a vessel of memory, history, and bureaucracy. Some tablets are inscribed with the mundane details of grain distribution, while others contain letters, hymns, or legal contracts. The subtle weight of responsibility presses upon every hand that holds these small slabs of clay. You pause to watch a scribe demonstrate proper stylus technique to a young apprentice. He holds the instrument delicately, showing how to angle it just so, pressing each wedge precisely into the soft clay. The apprentice mirrors his movements, concentrating intently. The wedge must speak as clearly as the voice of the gods, the teacher murmurs. His words are almost ceremonial, a gentle reminder that writing is more than a task. It is a sacred act, a preservation of memory and order. Nearby, two apprentices giggle softly as they attempt to duplicate a complex tablet. One accidentally presses a wedge upside down, while the other's line drifts slightly out of alignment. The senior scribe shakes his head with a faint smile. Historians still argue whether perfection was ever truly achieved, he says, and the apprentices laugh quietly, returning to their meticulous work. You notice the careful attention paid not only to the writing itself, but also to the preparation of the clay. Each tablet is smoothed, shaped, and inspected for imperfections before the stylus touches its surface. The process is deliberate and unhurried, a quiet meditation in which patience becomes as important as skill. Even a tiny mistake could compromise the record's clarity, and once baked, the clay will hold those marks indefinitely. At the far end of the courtyard, a scribe carefully rolls a cylinder seal across a freshly inscribed tablet. The impression leaves a small but precise signature, a mark of authenticity and authority. This seal guarantees that the tablet's contents are legitimate and ensures that any message reaching a distant city can be trusted. You realize that these small carved tools are an early form of security, a clever solution to the universal problem of trust. Beyond the official records, you notice a stack of literary tablets, hymns, poems, and short narratives. One contains a song to the goddess Inanna, each wedge arranged in careful repetition that makes the tablet almost musical. Another describes a trader's journey along the Euphrates, detailing obstacles, encounters, and the natural landscape. These writings remind you that while bureaucracy may drive much of cuneiform's purpose, humans have always sought expression, creativity, and the recording of personal experience. Historians still debate the extent to which these literary texts were read or widely circulated, but their existence testifies to the enduring human desire to tell stories. Even as scribes record grain and taxes, they are also shaping culture, weaving the mundane and the artistic into a shared memory. Outside the temple courtyard, the city hums with life. Farmers carry water, children run along alleys chasing each other's shadows, and women balance jars on their heads. The interplay of light and movement casts soft shadows across mud brick walls, giving the streets a sense of texture and life. You pause to watch a small group of apprentices pause to share a quiet joke, their laughter muffled by the walls, delicate and fleeting like the sound of wind through reeds. You follow one scribe to the riverbank, where he dips a small brush into water and smooths the edges of a freshly inscribed tablet. He whispers softly as he works, almost as if speaking to the clay itself. May these words endure. May they be understood. May they speak across time. The tenderness of the moment strikes you. Even in the most technical work, there is a human desire to connect, to communicate, to leave a trace. A child nearby has placed a small clay tablet in the sun to dry. He presses a tiny wedge into its surface with a stylus borrowed from his older sibling. The mark is crooked, imperfect, and yet proud. The child steps back and admires his work as if it were a masterpiece. You smile, realizing that the act of writing, whether precise or clumsy, carries a kind of magic. It transforms thought into permanence. Further along, a messenger prepares to carry a bundle of tablets to a nearby city. Each is carefully wrapped, sealed, and tied, ensuring it will survive the journey. The scribe adjusts the bundle and sets it aside, noting each tablet's contents in his ledger. The system is efficient, elegant in its simplicity, and yet it carries a profound weight. Messages that may travel hundreds of miles, carrying law, commerce, devotion, and personal notes, all pressed into humble clay. As the day progresses, the city continues its quiet rhythm. The heat rises, dust dances in the sun, and voices blend into a steady murmur. Children run along the edges of streets, their laughter blending with the rhythmic tapping of styluses and the distant bleating of goats. Somewhere, a dog barks, and a bird calls from a rooftop. The sounds are minor, fleeting, yet they weave together into a tapestry of life. You pause near a stack of older tablets, their surfaces worn from repeated handling. One bears a list of temple offerings, grains, and oil. Another records a legal dispute settled months ago. You can almost imagine the hands that shaped them, the care with which wedges were pressed, the tiny flourishes added at the end of a line. In these simple marks lies the essence of civilization, memory, order, and the desire to endure. Even as the day wanes, scribes continue their work, carefully balancing the weight of administration with the need for permanence and clarity. They handle every tablet with reverence, aware that each wedge pressed into clay carries the hopes, transactions, and beliefs of countless people. A gentle breeze drifts across the courtyard as you step outside, carrying the faint smell of river mud and baked earth. The city of Uruk hums softly, alive in its own quiet way. You feel the continuity of effort, from apprentice to master, from clay to kiln, from human hand to enduring record. Every tablet, every wedge, every seal is a testament to patience, persistence, and the quiet, relentless work of memory itself. Twilight descends softly over the city, casting long amber shadows across the streets of Uruk. The river glimmers faintly, reflecting streaks of orange and violet from the fading sun. The city hums with a quiet, measured energy. Merchants call their last prices, children dart through alleyways for one final game, and women carry the last water jars of the day to their homes. The air carries a comforting mix of baked clay, river mud, and the faint scent of cooking fires. You wander toward the temple district, drawn by the familiar rhythm of scribes at work. Despite the waning daylight, several remain in the open courtyard, finishing tablets that will be stored overnight in the archive. The soft clicking of styluses against clay echoes faintly, blending with distant murmurs and the occasional clatter of a cart. There's a meditative quality to the sound, hypnotic in its repetition, grounding you in the present moment while connecting you to countless others who have pressed wedges into clay across millennia. A scribe places a stack of finished tablets carefully on a drying rack, brushing away stray bits of clay. His movements are slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial. You notice the concentration in his eyes, the faint tension in his shoulders, the gentle exhalations as he smooths each surface. Precision is patience, he murmurs to an apprentice, who nods earnestly. Historians still argue whether the rituals surrounding tablet preparation were strictly practical or imbued with a spiritual significance. But either way, the act is treated with reverence. Nearby, a young apprentice traces the edges of a tablet, whispering numbers and symbols under her breath. One of her peers giggles as a stylus slips, leaving a wedge slightly askew. The senior scribe smiles knowingly. "Even the gods forgive small errors," he says softly, though you catch a hint of playful sarcasm in his tone. The children laugh quietly, their amusement blending seamlessly with the serious work unfolding around them. You move closer to a scribe who is rolling a finely carved cylinder seal across a fresh tablet. The impression is perfect, a miniature relief of a lion flanked by stars, signifying authority and divine favor. Each rotation of the seal leaves a tactile mark of authentication, ensuring that the contents are recognized as genuine when they travel to another city. It's a subtle but ingenious system, an early solution to the problem of trust. Beyond the administrative tablets, you notice a small pile of literary works, hymns, prayers, and short narratives. One hymn praises Inanna, the goddess of love and war, with careful, rhythmic wedges. Another recounts the journey of a merchant down the Euphrates, noting obstacles, meetings, and trade arrangements. The combination of practical and creative writing underscores an important truth. While bureaucracy preserves order, humans have always sought to record emotion, narrative, and art alongside facts and figures. The courtyard grows quieter as the sun sinks below the horizon. Lanterns are lit, casting warm, flickering light across the cobblestones. The scribes continue their work with steady hands, the glow of the lamps highlighting the intricate patterns of wedge marks. There is a calm, ritualistic cadence to the scene, the blending of light, clay, and human attention creating a sense of timelessness. A messenger approaches, carrying a bundle of tablets to be delivered to a neighboring city. Each tablet is carefully wrapped and tied, protected for its journey. You notice small personal notes tucked among the official records, reminders, jokes, or minor observations. Historians still debate whether these annotations were intended for humor, convenience, or private communication, but their presence reminds you that even bureaucratic work was infused with humanity. As the evening deepens, a gentle breeze drifts through the courtyard, stirring dust motes and carrying the faint scent of river water. The distant sound of children playing fades, replaced by the soft croak of frogs and the low hum of nocturnal life. You pause, feeling a deep sense of calm, marveling at the continuity of effort embodied in every tablet, every wedge, and every seal. The senior scribe surveys the courtyard, nodding at the work completed. He gathers a few remaining tablets, brushing them gently before placing them into the storage baskets. His hands are steady, practiced, and reverent. You realize that each motion, though routine, is an act of care, an acknowledgement that the work performed today preserves the memory and structure of civilization. Nearby, the apprentices gather their tools, chatting quietly. One whispers to another about a humorous mistake made earlier, causing soft laughter to ripple across the courtyard. Even amidst discipline, the human touch endures, reminding you that every record carries the personality of its creator alongside the facts it preserves. You take a moment to look across the river, where the last light of day shimmers on its surface. The city behind you is slowly settling, streets emptying, doors closing, and the hum of daily activity giving way to the stillness of night. The soft glow of lamps illuminates mud brick walls, highlighting the careful artistry of human habitation. The space is designed, built, and maintained with intention. Every tablet completed today, every wedge pressed into clay, every seal rolled with care, is a conversation with the future. These small acts of recording are not fleeting. They carry intention, memory, and human presence across centuries. You feel a profound sense of connection, as if the hands that shaped clay thousands of years ago are reaching through time, brushing yours in silent acknowledgement. The night deepens further, bringing a gentle chill to the air. The sounds of the river, the distant animals, and the occasional footsteps of a late wanderer form a soft ambient soundtrack. Lanterns flicker, casting shadows that dance across the walls, reminding you of the quiet persistence of human effort. Every tablet left to dry, every record carefully stored, is a testament to patience, to the human desire to remember, and to the enduring power of writing. You pause once more, breathing in the mixture of clay, river, and evening air. The city rests, yet the traces of human diligence, the tablets, the marks, the preserved words remain vivid. In that moment, you understand a profound truth. Civilization's heartbeat is quiet but unyielding, and it persists in the small, deliberate acts of those who take care to preserve memory, order, and life itself. Night has fully settled over Uruk, cloaking the city in a gentle, velvety darkness. Lanterns glow softly along the streets, casting golden pools of light that flicker on the mud brick walls. The river shimmers faintly under the moon, reflecting stars like tiny specks of silver scattered across liquid glass. The air is cool, carrying the subtle scent of wet clay and distant cooking fires. You walk slowly, savoring the stillness, feeling as if the city itself exhales after a day of movement and work. In the temple district, the final scribes are finishing their last tasks. A few small clay tablets rest on drying racks, their wedges sharp and precise, their surfaces smooth and carefully shaped. A senior scribe brushes a hand gently over the edge of a tablet, inspecting it one last time before storing it in the archive. His movements are deliberate, each gesture carrying quiet pride and reverence. Even in these mundane records, lists of grain, letters, minor contracts, there is a sense of permanence, a silent acknowledgement that the future may one day peer back into this moment. You notice the apprentices gathering their tools and wiping their hands on damp cloths. Their chatter is low, almost conspiratorial, as they recount the small mishaps and triumphs of the day. Crooked wedges, misaligned lines, and a successfully rolled cylinder seal. A gentle laughter drifts through the courtyard, lightening the atmosphere. It reminds you, softly, that even in work bound by precision and permanence, humanity persists, curious, playful, and attentive. A young scribe adjusts a stack of tablets, checking that each one is properly aligned. You observe him pause to look over an older tablet, one with faded markings that have been pressed and handled countless times. He traces the wedges lightly with a finger, as if reading a conversation across the centuries. "These words remember us," he murmurs softly. Historians still argue whether scribes felt a spiritual connection to the tablets or approached them purely practically. But there is something almost sacred in the care evident in their handling. The soft rhythm of styluses tapping against clay has long since ceased, replaced by the ambient sounds of night, the gentle lapping of the river, the rustling of reeds in the breeze, and the occasional distant bark of a dog. A child's lullaby floats faintly from a nearby doorway, mingling with the scent of river mud and baking bread. The city breathes in a quiet harmony, a steady pulse under the surface of human activity, preservation, and memory. You wander toward the archive room, where the day's finished tablets have been carefully stored. The shelves are neat, each tablet placed with intention. There is a quiet majesty in this simple order, a sense that civilization itself is held in these small slabs of clay. Each wedge, each line is a testament to human effort, patience, and the desire to endure. Even in the mundane, there is poetry, a rhythm of human persistence pressed into the permanence of baked earth. Outside, the moon rises higher, casting a gentle glow across the courtyard. The silhouettes of palm trees sway softly in the breeze, their shadows stretching across the walls and floor. The river glistens faintly, a silver ribbon tracing the horizon. You pause, letting the cool night air brush against your skin, carrying the distant murmur of life. A goat's bleat, the soft shuffle of feet, and the whispering of the river over stones. The scribes who remain gather their tools, whispering last instructions to apprentices and sliding the final tablets into the shelves. The day's work is complete, yet the echoes of their effort linger. In the quiet of night, you sense the continuity of generations. Hands pressing wedges into clay, voices murmuring prayers or instructions, minds focused on preserving memory. Each act of writing, though ordinary, becomes an unbroken thread, linking the present with centuries yet to come. You pause by a small table where an apprentice has left a tablet, partially inscribed with a personal note. A humorous comment about a stubborn goat from the morning. A small observation about the weather. Even after the official records are complete, human touches endure. Small traces of life, personality, and humor that speak across time. It is a reminder that even the most formalized systems of writing were not without warmth and character. A gentle breeze stirs the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of clay, river, and evening fires. Lanterns flicker, shadows dance lightly across the walls, and the city seems to exhale. You lean against a mud brick wall, breathing in the calm. Everything feels slowed, measured, and soft, a perfect conclusion to the day's rhythms. The work of scribes, the persistence of memory, and the enduring hum of civilization create a soothing cadence that resonates in your chest. As you gaze across the courtyard, you reflect on the small, deliberate acts that have preserved history. The pressing of wedges, the rolling of seals, the careful storage of tablets. Each gesture, no matter how minor, contributes to a continuum that spans millennia. Even in the silence of night, their echoes remain, gentle, persistent, and reassuring. Finally, you allow yourself to sink into the calm of the moment. The city rests, the river whispers, the clay holds its stories patiently, and you, carried along by the subtle rhythm of life and memory, feel a gentle drowsiness settle in, a quiet surrender to the night. The wind softens, carrying the sense of river and clay, of baked bread and distant fires. Your thoughts drift like the leaves along the water, slow, soft, and meandering. Every image fades gently. The scribes' precise hands, the tablets lined neatly on shelves, the soft glow of lanterns, and the shimmering river under the moon. Time itself seems to stretch and relax. And in this stillness, you are reminded that the world persists through memory, through small, deliberate acts of care and attention. The clay tablets, pressed and baked, will endure far longer than a single human life, carrying with them fragments of people, cities, and civilizations. And now you drift with that quiet certainty, feeling the gentle comfort of history as it embraces the present and guides you softly towards sleep. The city of Uruk is hushed, bathed in moonlight. You feel the subtle cool of night against your skin, the soft hum of the river, the distant croak of frogs, and the faint whisper of wind through the reeds. Everything is slowing, folding in upon itself, creating a gentle cocoon of calm. You allow your eyes to trace the shapes of mud brick walls, the flicker of lanterns, the silhouettes of palm trees swaying. The weight of history presses lightly, not heavily, grounding you in a continuum of human experience, of care, of memory preserved. You imagine the scribes long gone, their hands steady, their thoughts deliberate, and yet entirely human. Their small, careful acts of writing, pressing wedges into clay, arranging tablets on shelves, sealing messages for distant cities, all of it endures. You realize that even in your own quiet evening, this rhythm, this gentle persistence connects you to something much larger, a story that stretches across millennia, unbroken, patient, and serene. And as your eyelids grow heavy, as your breath slows and deepens, you feel the city, the river, the clay, and the scribes fading softly into a comforting background hum. Every trace of human effort, every small story, every preserved moment becomes a gentle lullaby. The night is complete, safe, and patient. You rest in that quiet knowing, surrendering to the gentle cadence of history, to the persistence of memory, and to the soft, endless whisper of time itself. End of script. Sweet dreams.